Hello, 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 hello. Today I'm talking with Joanna Masraff. We talked about how she knows more about food than most people, not believing in normal, and how we're all superheroes, yet not superhumans. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, hello everyone, and hello with me I have Joe. I think that's how I should pronounce your name, right?
Yep, Joe, Joanna, that one over there. Any of those names will do.
Well, and over there, we can immediately go to what is over there. And in my case, I'm in Ghent, in Belgium, where we've actually met.
Yeah.
Well, not in Ghent, but we met in Belgium just a couple of weeks ago at XP Day Benelux. And we go directly to Edinburgh, where you are at this very moment, I think. Is this
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, I'm actually
And
just south of Edinburgh, out in the hills, in the middle of nowhere, but Edinburgh's very close. So,
well, like I always say, I don't want to help stalkers to find the
no.
exact location. So, so with some people, I know the exact address, but I am purposely never take the exact address. I'm happy if I have already a city or somewhere in somewhere near, or yeah, sometimes it's not even called a city. Um, but yeah. And on my side, it's now with we it's it's 5:30. Let's say it. And on your side, what's the time on your side?
It's 4:30. About an
Because
hour behind.
we're not that far away, but indeed there is a little time zone difference.
Yeah,
Um,
which is hard to understand actually, because when you look at the longitudes and latitudes, it doesn't quite add up all the time. But anyway.
uh, yeah, it's dangerous to go in that road, but let's say in the UK and everything, there are things that I don't always understand, decisions
This
and
is true.
whatever. So, so
This is true. Yes.
that's there is a lot there. We can, I think we can talk a lot about that, but let's not go in there. Joe, for the people that don't know you, before we jump into the question, how would you want people to know you? What do you want people to know about you?
Okay, so I'm half Scottish, half Canadian, so that's the funny accent you're hearing. It's not very Scottish. I'm type 1 diabetic and have been for most of my life. I obviously have reduced sight in one eye. We'll tackle the eye patch in the room quickly, huh? And so basically I could have my glasses, but it's hard for me to see, so I wear an eye patch for me. And I'm a single mom. And what else? I studied as a developer to start with, so I have some development and tech background, and I've been working in agile since 2008. That's probably a nice little round way to introduce myself.
And going to all kind of parts of your life, both the
Mm.
professional, the private part, but also the medical part, which indeed is very well. I like the way you introduced. You said, "Okay, let's immediately talk about it because it's very visible your eye patch," and I can imagine that people. Is there something you want to share about that, or is that for you like no?
I honestly don't mind. I if people want to ask, I prefer people come and ask, right?
Mhm.
I due to my diabetes, there's a thing with diabetes called diabetic retinography, where the blood vessels in the back of your eye and your retina they burst due to having to try and control your blood sugars all the time. So because of that, what can happen is you get scar tissue that forms between your retina and your eyeball, and that causes a detachment of your eyeball from the retina. And they have, unfortunately, I'm in the 5% where medical surgery can't fix the detachment. So I have a permanent oil bubble now in my eyeball, and this keeps the eyeball pressed against the retina, so I still have some vision, but I have a kind of dark spot that wavers kind of around here, and the rest of it kind of looks like I'm looking through water a little bit. So it's due to diabetes. Let's be fair. In my 20s, I think I pretended I wasn't a diabetic. So I wasn't a terribly good diabetic in my 20s, but I did have a lot of fun, and I'm now kind of suffering for it, but not really suffering, because what I've learned is one eyeball is definitely sufficient. I'm not there's nothing I can't do with just one eyeball, which has been very interesting to find out this year.
Because it's linked to be diabetic, is there a risk that you lose sight in both of your eyes, or that there is a risk there?
There is a risk, yes. So this is where I really am keeping my fingers and toes crossed, that I'm able to keep sight in this eye, so I can keep doing everything that I need to do. That's a big scary thing kind of hanging over, but so far so good. This eye looks strong, and the doctors are so far comfortable that I will keep sight in this eye, but we are keeping an eye on it.
You said also that you were less, how do you set it, in your 20s, you were less paying attention. Is that, or is the fact that you're now paying much more attention helping you in that, or is that
Yeah.
unrelated?
Yes, definitely. So a better control means I'm more likely to keep sight. So that's good.
So yeah, basically it's also kind of warning for the young kids, be careful if you're
Yeah,
diabetic or other things. Like there is some message in what doctors tell you
yeah,
and whatever, like there is a reason why they tell you
yeah.
this.
There is, but also tech has advanced hugely since when I was a child. So these days, I call myself a bionic woman sometimes, because I have, I'm attached to an insulin pump constantly, and I also have a sensor which I attach to my arm, which gives you 24-hour blood sugar readings. Back when I was a kid, it took 2 minutes for one blood test, so you can imagine how many you did a day. It was 4 to 6, maybe up to 10 on bad days. But now I have readings which technology which can tell me in my phone, using NFC, what my blood sugar readings are 24/7. So that really helps. Really helps a
By the
lot.
time there is a problem, you instantly know, and you don't need to. So again, or in a more agile, or to link it back to agile, very fast feedback that's
Yes.
actually helping you to make your life better.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that's
And even
yeah.
noticing patterns and things like that, so you can adjust different parts of your own care. It's in your hands, you know yourself best, and all these kinds of things. It's just it's incredible.
Yeah, I've followed or listened to a podcast where there were people who talked about, okay, looking at their blood sugars. And again, this is for non-diabetic people, but that they learned a lot about what that meant. Okay, when I eat this, that
Mhm.
happening. That gives me this kind of energy, and this is why I have a dip, and this is why. And so really interesting to learn, like, okay, the more you follow, the better you understand that for some people this kind of food might give you a sugar high, but for other people it might have less effect, or depending on
Yeah,
what you eat before or after, you kind of work around that. And it was really interesting to see how much we can learn. And again, immediate feedback. So you eat something, and then the day after, you could really look and see the graph
yeah,
changing in your. So that's and of course for them it's more for I don't know, for all kind of reasons, but for you, you really depend much more onto that,
yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say that I know more about food than most people after being a diabetic for some time. Even the combinations of food, and how that affects you energy wise, how long it can affect you, and all that kind of thing. So I'm sure my poor son doesn't like me for it very much. No sweeties. Know too much about sugars and what they can do, but at the same time, it's nice to know these things, to understand these things, and it just develops as a extra, almost as a part of who you are.
Well, I think all of us as parents or as adults and even as children, we know that sugar is not healthy and we don't want to do it. But if you have the immediately feedback that you see, if you see that, oh, this is actually why I now have a sugar dip, and because of that I feel this and I want that, it's actually much more practical, I would say. And in
Mm,
your case, you can even link it back to losing your eye. And I
yeah.
can still imagine that your son, he doesn't feel it like this at this age, but in 20 years he will probably be much more happy to have learned that before he, yeah, got
Yeah.
into bad habits, I would say.
Yes.
um,
But
Although I can imagine that
chocolate's
he will
allowed.
still experiment with sugar at some
I'm
point.
sure. I'm sure. Yes. But yeah, so chocolate's allowed in our house because chocolate, of course, has the fat, which balances out the sugar. So it's all about your GI glycemic index of the food. Anyway, we're getting very sidetracked into we could have a conversation about anything, I think.
Yeah, and but that I always try to see in the introduction also what are there other things that might be interesting, and in this very case, you brought up indeed two important things that were linked, that for all, where a lot of people don't even realize it.
Mm,
And for me, like I said, this is the immediately feedback that we can get. We learn so much, and that is not just a lot of books, because I can imagine that even as when you were young, people would have told you some things, but might be harder to, what does that now mean for my
yeah,
body and everything. And so thanks to technology, we and especially you know a lot more now.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Let's jump into that very first question. What is, now we talked about two things that people know or might know. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but it still has influenced you in who you are?
So this was a difficult one, actually. Actually, a lot of your questions are very good questions. Let's be fair. So I
Good
have,
questions, but still difficult to answer.
yeah, absolutely. Um, Good questions usually are, I find. So the thing I've picked out is that I have called myself a pagan since I was very young, and how this has influenced me is in I call myself an agile and sustainability coach, not just an agile coach. So I should have used that in the introduction. Uh, more introduction pieces. Anyway, and that's very much helped me in thinking about what I value about life, and how I connect with nature and with the planet as a huge part of my kind of value system, I suppose. So yeah, that's the. I'm a pagan. That doesn't mean that I go and dance naked in the woods or anything like that. Don't. This is always why there was the fear when I was younger of telling people that I was a pagan, which I'm just kind of getting over now, because people have such preconceptions about what that means. But actually, for me, it's just this. It's an alternative religion. So instead of saying, that I believe in God, I believe in Mother Nature as my goddess in a way. So that's the easiest way to kind of explain what that means to me.
Did that influence you then in who you are?
Well,
Except for the being scared of telling other people, because that's something.
I think it allowed me to be more inclusive, actually. So
Mm.
um, because paganism was and still is kind of sidelined quite a lot, and people have these assumptions about what it means. It allowed me to be more accepting of others with alternative views, for example, and also accepting of whatever religion, whatever your faith, whatever your beliefs are. There is commonality between all of us and all of what we believe. Well, at least that's how I see it anyway. So it really helped me be a little bit more objective and inclusive in how I am with people.
Sounds like that started in one part of your life and that wasn't there when you were younger. Could you say some more about when did you feel that you are more inclusive towards others? is there something that triggered this, or is that something that was always there and you just didn't realize it? How should I see that?
I think it's so the paganism was only one part of that. I think it's always been there in me, because even, being diagnosed as a diabetic as a young child, there's this difference, even the fact that the accent that I have, that's a bit different as well. So I've always accepted that I am not normal. In fact, I don't believe in normal, probably because of this. So there's this. It's just another kind of thing which adds to this deeper understanding, or accepting of people, whoever they are and wherever they come from. Um, you don't necessarily know what that person's context is, and that's not just their deeper beliefs and values. It can also be reflective of how they are in the moment, depending on whatever's happened to them in that day, right? So it's I like to give allowances for people, uh, because I truly believe underneath it all that people are good. And my personal brand is that we're all superheroes. We all have a superpower. We might not know what that is yet, but I believe we all are superheroes in one extent or another. So it allowed me to take a step back and look at things more from that wider perspective, which I think is very important when dealing with people and even the world today, right?
And when you say we're all superheroes, we might not know what's our superpower. Do you know, or what is your superpower?
I had a feeling you would ask me this. So this for me changes. So I'm a very um, do you find that you go through kind of stages in life? So there's certain times in life when you're very strong in one thing and not so strong in another, and then something maybe triggers you, or you go through something and you find yourself reflecting upon things and actually changing, and maybe your weakness becomes your superpower, right? So when I was younger, when I kind of was at university and just graduating, I believed that my superpower was explaining complex issues in simple terms so that everybody could understand it. And that's actually one of the reasons why I went into IT, was because I could explain tech to people who weren't techies. And so I used this as my superpower. Um, Now, I think that my superpower is actually partly due what we were just talking about, which is really seeing the wider perspective of people in order to kind of be their cheerleader, in order for them to see that, they're not that strange, they're not that different. They are still amazing, wonderful human beings, no matter what they're going through, or the trials that they're having. That doesn't stop them from being amazing, from having superpowers. And just creating this space for people to feel empowered, and to do the things that they want to do, rather than kind of maybe scared or held back by their own lack of self-worth and lack of self-confidence.
That for these people who lack that self-confidence and who might not know yet, how easy is it for you? Because you say, I really believe that all people are good. How is that when people are behaving badly towards you, or yeah, are misbehaving towards you? How easy is it then to still see them as good people?
That depends on the day. Let's be
Oh,
fair.
wait.
I am also human. I'm not superhuman, even though I have superpowers. But some days, and also I think it depends on how well you know the person as well. So
Mm.
completely out of context, a complete stranger doing something on the street. I also think you need to set your boundaries as to what's acceptable behavior towards yourself, right? In order to continue to feel your own superpower, shall we say. So it's okay, almost in terms of nonviolent communication terms, to say, are you aware that what you said actually affected other people in a different way from maybe you expected. What you said was upsetting for some people. Was that what you meant to say? This kind of thing. So I'm not really answering your question. I'm going around in circles. However,
Oh, I do feel, because it's like you say. I mean, there are moments that I think that the setting your boundaries is part of it. Is like, okay, and that's a little bit why I was asking, because I can still appreciate people even if I want to go to boundaries and say, okay, but
yeah,
that's as far as I allow you to go, and that's a way to, well, you could also start treating them badly, and by just setting the boundaries and say, okay,
yeah,
this is my boundary. I respect you, and you want whatever, and you say the thing. When you give back the feedback, hey, this is actually hurting you, again are still treating them as humans. And I really appreciate also the fact that you say, well, it depends on the day. It could be days that you
yeah,
might just say, well, whatever, this is, I don't have the energy, or I don't have the spoons to deal with this today. So
absolutely.
that's definitely something. So thanks for going a little bit deeper into that. Let's move to that second question.
Sure.
If you would, because you talked about being into IT and that you were good at explaining tech to non-tech people, but if you have not been doing what you've been doing now, what would have become of you? Do you have any idea? Was there a plan for little Joe? For
So
Yeah.
little Joe, there's a couple of things. So I wanted to be a singer, of course, like a lot of little
Mhm.
girls. And I still sing for fun. And I even compared karaoke at one point. So and I have a new party trick which I call JukeBox JO. So you tell me the song you want me to sing, and I'll sing you a couple lines. So, but
Almost competitive, I would say.
sorry.
Almost competitive, as is like, I want to prove that I can do this, or am I exaggerating
So it's more an excuse to sing,
here?
actually,
Right, much better. Yeah, I like that. Okay.
because I
So,
love to sing. It's almost part of my creative expression of myself. So I love a chance to just sing out to people. So that's all it is. Um, the other one was when I was 11, 12, I drew on paper a design of environmentally friendly car that used wind power. So it was a car that had windmills baked into the front of it. So it's always been engineering of some sort. So I think it probably would have been mechanical engineering if it hadn't been computer science, computer engineering.
so always some kind of designing something new. If it's into software or something else, but there's really like inventing as a part of it. Should I even say?
I see it more as a problem solving
Hmm. Right. So
and
you
figuring
come
out.
up with a problem, and I'm helping you, and that today by coincidence you do it in software, but that could have
Yeah,
been any kind of thing.
yeah.
Uh,
Though actually, I see today it's more I help with people, not necessarily software.
right. I really like that. And that's and when was that? Because we briefly talked about your idea of singing as a little one, little Joe. But when was there a moment where you actively decided on IT and could have been easily moved into another kind of direction?
Uh, yes. So I had a really good teacher who was female, which helped. And I it almost was a shock to me to realize how much that influenced me having a female IT teacher who helped me get into IT.
Wait,
Um,
when you say it was almost a shock, when did that occur to you that you had that?
So I'm sure I've recognized it before in my past, but I last week I was helping out at a Women in Computing event with the for girls in the local area. So it's a big event that is
Hmm.
run for the second year and running at St George's School, and And while some of the people were talking about what had influenced them to go into IT, I suddenly had this light bulb moment, realizing that, however many years ago, we're not going to say, right? I was in school, having a female IT teacher back then was actually not common. And the fact that
You
I had,
didn't realize that when you
mm,
were young.
yes, exactly, exactly.
Mm.
So, so I kind of had this realization that her being female had really affected my belief in myself to be able to do that, instead of seeing it as a male oriented field, which it really was. I mean, at university, I was four girls and 120 boys.
And did that when you joined, because this is interesting, you had that female role model for
Yeah,
you. You didn't think that it at that way because for you it was just a role model, not really realizing. Then you go to university where you're only four women. Did
yeah.
that shock you at that time? Did you then realize something, or was that, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
so I'm pretty sure at that point I was very happy that I'd had the teacher that I had, for sure.
Mm.
I obviously, before I went into the course, I knew that it was male oriented, and that was part of the decision making process. But it was a real a bit of a shock to realize how much, how much the difference in sexes at the time was, in genders. So um, yes, thank you, Miss Cowie. If you are listening, you won't be a Miss Cowie anymore, but very much appreciate it. But on top of that, my father um, bought us one of the first computers, home computers, when we were very young. So he'd seen, had the foresight, he must have done, that computers were going to be big. And this was in
He
sort of,
was not into IT, for clarity. It was
no.
just that he said, "Okay, I'll invest in this because it will be good for my children."
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly what he did. And this, we're talking mid 90s at this point. So, very, very basic dial up internet and that kind of thing. But
But
he,
already internet. I mean, yeah, so there was already that kind
the
of
first
thing.
one,
All
no.
right.
The second computer, yes. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. But it's very early days, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, you for those who don't realize it, it means that you had to dial in, and at that moment you could use the telephone or fax if people had already fax. So it basically meant blocking the whole house from communication or from people calling in or calling out in
yeah.
that sense. So I do remember a lot of people having trouble discussing when will we turn on computers and internet because you couldn't do both at that time. Or yeah, you needed
Yeah.
to have two telephone lines, which most people didn't have.
Yeah.
I think that's also rather important that most people, well, my children can't realize that
Mm.
that was completely different. And so, do you have any idea what triggered your father to buy that computer?
I have no idea, actually. I'm going to ask him. That's a good question.
Yeah, it's really interesting that because he had that inside. We also had a computer at home, but my father was working into IT,
Mm.
so he had been working on the very first computers in
Wow.
Belgium. So yeah, things that can't even enter my house because they're so big, and I was able to see that at some point when I joined him. So it's a completely different environment, I think,
Mm.
being supported by yeah by a father that
Yeah.
realizes, hey, this could help, and that's really nice. And so you not only had a role model, but you also had yeah a father that, or and I guess parents that wanted to
Yeah.
support you in that kind of role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And was there, you talked about having just being only four people when you joined. Was there at some point you felt like, oh, this is really too much male? I'm really questioning your decision for yourself.
Not that I remember. I didn't find it a bad thing, which is
Mm.
maybe interesting.
It was a challenge for you then.
I didn't necessarily even feel it a challenge. It was almost like we had an advantage by being the only four girls, because well, you would find somebody to help you if you needed it, put it that way.
But it's not like, because there have been people on the podcast here that said that there were teachers actually trying to discourage them to continue and saying like, this is not for you. That didn't happen in your case. It was more like the students, the co-students wanted to help you. That's what I'm hearing.
That's what I remember. I mean, there were definitely some teachers when you weren't doing very well who tried to put you off, but that I didn't feel that that was a gender specific thing.
They
I just
just did it with everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and that might have been me wearing blindfolds. I didn't have the patch then, but maybe in another way I did, right? But no, I don't feel it was that. But then I've also always felt like I have quite masculine energy, so a lot of what people talk about with some of the gender specific difficulties they've had in specific industries, I've been extremely lucky in that I've never felt any of that, or very, very rarely. And I think it is because I come across quite confident, slightly masculine oriented with my energies, and that's actually helped me not come to any form of harassment, really, in IT, where a lot of women have.
Again, like you say, you if you had been held back, you didn't feel it was personally or gender related because they were. And I think, yeah, sometimes teachers are like that or professors are like that, that they want to, I don't know, limit the people going in. I really feel they should support people much more than try to hinder. But somehow some of these people feel that that's the part of their role.
Mm,
Okay, we can discuss how healthy that is. But for some people, it might work. And then definitely what I'm hearing is it didn't held you back. Um, yeah,
no.
so that's and talking about challenges, I want to move to that third question. What do you consider at this point your biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you? At least the biggest challenge you want to share openly on the internet, of course.
So, I another difficult and good question. And I kind of look back on my life as a series of challenges, actually. Um, but the biggest challenge right now is actually finding the balance between all of the different kind of hats that I wear. So we have, the mother, we have the daughter, because I live in a two-in-one house with my mother, who's disabled and on sticks and can't walk very well. We have the agile coach. We have the sustainability coach. We have the person who's just about to launch her own business at the same time as being, part-time employed. There's all these kind of different hats that I wear, and it's figuring out how to balance all of these different priorities in order to be a person that I am comfortable being, or like I like to use this phrase, my favorite version of myself, to the most time I can be that person, rather than ending up kind of being a half as good in all of these things. It's how do you be the person you want to be with all of the different hats that you have to wear. So why is this a good thing for me? I think it's really help me apply some agile principles to my life, right? So it's thinking about what's the priority within the time frame that you have, really thinking about absolute must-haves versus, I would like to be able to do this. So I've had to say no to more things, which I think is a sign of strength, actually being able to say no, but very difficult at times. So it's balancing, prioritizing, and then really focusing on what is valuable to me and to where I want to go with my life and with what I'm doing, in order to make sure that I'm focusing on the most important, most valuable things within that.
Talk about values, and in one way, for a lot of us, most of our values are kind of fixed. They might move a little bit, but they might not change. But I can imagine that you talked about all these different kind of roles, and yeah, with all kind of roles, all kind of priorities, things shift a lot. Is that happening as well with you, that you sometimes think like, okay, maybe that was the best decision last week, this week it's different? How is that for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because as we've kind of touched on already, people change, people are different, people's context changes, what they need as well. So because uh, mother always is the first one on my list, right? Because I'm a mom, what are the needs of my child this week, today, this hour?
It's interesting because you say mother was the first. I was thinking when you said that phrase that your mother was the first, but actually you say my
No,
mother role is the first, not
yeah,
my daughter role or
yes,
my care. I don't know because it feels like when you take care of your mother, it's not the daughter role, but it's more like a
mm,
caretaker for your mother as the role. Uh,
yeah. And it's almost a balance between those two again. So it's
right.
almost like multiple hats with one role. So, but no, definitely being a mother, my
Mm,
role as a mother is number one.
mhm.
So balancing everything else around the needs of my child for that day, that week, that hour, um, uh, and he's on the autistic spectrum as well, so that can be challenging. Is so it changes. It definitely changes, and I can say yes to something, and then have to say, actually I need to change this because of the context of other things around me at the time, right? So yeah, continuous balancing, juggling act.
And because you say very explicitly that mother role is on the first place, what about your own, I don't know, health, about your own everything for yourself, self care? How is that related to that role?
Oh,
If you
great.
care to change.
Yeah. um so it's actually something that I struggle with prioritizing, and that I am looking to prioritize more next year. I tried to prioritize it more this year, and I suppose I have had to because of various operations and things with my eye. um, but it does tend to be the thing that you forget, or you automatically do to the extent that you must do, but the extras that would help, you forget to prioritize. Does that make sense?
I think all parents struggle with this at some point or at the bigger point of their life. Um, and for me, it's well, I just said it to someone else earlier today. Is that this is what we call the airplane rule, right? That they say you first have to put on your mask
Yeah.
before you put on. And I do remember for a very long time that when they were talking about that, when it's not like I was hopping on planes every week, but for a very long time when I was on a plane, I got bored with that reminder because it's like, yeah, I know this already. Why do you keep telling it? The last, I don't know, well, it started before Corona, so it's maybe 8 or 10 years already. I've learned to use that message to think for myself. Okay, did I actually take care of myself
Mhm.
since the last time I took a plane? To actually use that moment to think about it, and most of the time the answer is no, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's it's for me. It's a good reminder because it's as much as I know that is important, it's still it's very specifically as a parent it's very hard. We always have the tendency to jump in and help out, but at some point we're out of energy, and then we might not help our children or our family at the moment that they might most need it. um,
Yes.
and that's it. This is, I know it's a hard question when I ask it because for most people it's like, yeah, I'm not good at balancing. And even the people who are good at balancing, they still feel that they're not good at that.
Mm.
I would say, but I think it is important to keep talking about it because
Yeah.
somehow a lot of people think that they're the only one struggling with it and the rest
Mm.
around us are much better. And I would dare to say all of us were struggling with it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make a difference what age children are. I mean, yeah, little children, little problems, bigger children, bigger
Yeah.
problems, I would say.
Yeah, it's quite right. It's quite right.
But,
Yeah.
until at some point it shifts to like what you're saying, that you need to take care of your mother, then that's a completely different swap, of course.
Yes. Yes. And in some ways, I'm quite good at taking care of myself, in that I think sometimes I feel like I do less than others, but it's actually that I just do more from home. Because that allows me to do the multiple things at once, as it were. So it's back to that, everybody has their own context that they put, or that they almost compare themselves within, right? When actually it's understanding that wider context in order to normalize in a way where you are. And like you say, everybody has these issues. Nobody is great at the balancing act when you're a parent. So maybe we should not worry about it so much.
The kind of discussion about worrying what other people think and what we kind of feel that is the right thing to do. Even if we know it, we shouldn't worry, we still do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why many people spend many hours in therapy thinking about and yeah,
yeah,
learning about this, that things that kind of we already know, but at the same time we never really learn, I
yeah,
would say.
yes.
I want to move to that next question. What's driving you? Because if I just talking here, and we talked at XP Day Benelux, and also yesterday at another location remotely, I feel a lot of passion. I feel a lot of drive with you. Do you know where that drive, where that passion is coming from?
So we're in a tough place, right? And when we look at the state of the world, it's and I don't want to give too much away about the book that we're going to talk about. So we're in the sustainability crisis, we call it, in the sustainability movement, we call it the meta crisis, right? So we have so many different crises or wicked problems interconnected, causing really big issues. The huge poverty worldwide. We still have a problem with diversity and inclusion. Then we've got the state of the planet, the weather issues that are happening, which are going to have a knock-on effect to the way that we live and to civilization as it stands right now. So what drives me now is the belief that we really can do things differently and do things better, and that I can help as a change agent to make that happen. That doesn't mean that I have all the answers or that I can paint the picture as to a beautiful future that we can create, but it does mean that I can help move us. I believe that I can help move us in the right direction. I also believe that all agilists have this power to help make change, right? And to help make change for the better. So, what really drives me is this underlying belief that we can do better and that we want to be able to do better. And that actually, when you speak to people, nobody really says that the world and that their life is perfect and as they want it right now, at least not those who I communicate with. So if everybody is believing that they want things to be better, why are we sitting here and not doing something about it? I'm definitely doing something about it. I know you're doing something about it. So why can we not help others do something about that? And that's really what drives me.
Back at, well, your life, it almost sounds like it's over, which is not what I mean, but if you look back at earlier, do you
Mm.
know when that started with you? Is that something you always had when you were a little girl, or is that something that happened when you start work, or do you know more about this?
So it's something that's come and gone throughout my life, actually, but it's definitely
Hmm.
been there the whole time. It's just how much I've listened to that instinct. Does that make sense? So, for example, when I was in school, I helped set up, uh, and I'm going to forget the name, of course. It was charity that was running a phone line for children who were experiencing difficulties at home or in the playground. So it was an anonymous phone line for kids, and it's probably called Phone Line, of course. Childline, that's what it was called. Childline, got there eventually. Um, and so even in
Wait,
early,
and you started organizing because that didn't exist, and you helped out, and all of a sudden it did
not
exist.
not quite. So it did exist already, but what I did was I brought it to my school. I created charity event for raising money for Childline while I was just in my mid senior school. So we're talking
Wait,
14,
senior school. Yeah. So what you were about to say, 14 years old? Is that what
yeah,
I hear?
14, 15 years old. And here I am running events for charity to raise money for Childline because I could see there was a problem and I wanted to do something about it.
Wait, but because we have something similar in Belgium, and there it's
Mm.
an open line that is actually a phone number where people can call all
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
There used to be a certain hours when they could call, but it was basically available around the country. Did I hear now that that was only it was um it didn't exist, or it wasn't possible for people from your location to call that, and you kind of raised money so that they could have something similar in your region, or how should I see that?
So nothing as big as that. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'm not. It's not all my fault. No, yeah, no, I
But
haven't done anything that wonderful. But I still was. I saw that the charity needed money, so I saw some adverts saying we need to raise money for Childline. I think they might have maybe had to close some of their services or restrict the number of hours or something like that. And I was like, okay, we need to fight against this. This is something that we can do. And so, yeah, I brought the charity to the school and raised some money with a it was a big what would you call it? I struggle with words sometimes, so you're seeing this come out. I forget what the word is for certain things. A talent contest. That's what it was. So I had a talent contest for charity, and we raised a lot of money for the charity. So even back then, if I saw it's almost like an injustice, uh, I thought I could help, I would jump in and help. So it's this theme that's kind of carried on a little bit. A lot of the times when I've the things that I've done have been just myself rather than trying to help others do it too. However, with learning as a coach, I've definitely started bringing more people along on the journey with me rather than just uh, almost feeling better about myself by doing something for myself. It's actually it's bigger than that. I've realized I have, we have more powers than just being able to change ourselves, especially as agilists, as change agents.
when I hear also your story, and especially if your story when you were 14 years old is also the what is now known as the first follower principle. Like, you see some people doing something
Yeah.
and you jump in helping them much more, and you said also you did other things on your own, but this, I see a lot of that with you, that you see something, you see, oh, they need help, and you jump in and make that momentum bigger and help out, which spreads much more, which is, yeah, I'm a big fan of that type of leadership. We shouldn't all invent some kind of
No.
things. We just that's also part of sustainability. Let's not keep
Yeah.
inventing stuff, but let's something that's there. Let's give that more attention. Let's give that more money or do something around that. And that's actually, for me, a very powerful way of supporting things. Somehow, we live in a world that wants to give attention mostly to the people who are inventing stuff, but
Mm,
that being the first, and maybe not the very first, but being among the first people who support something is
yeah.
really valuable, to support something, to make it grow. And yeah, I think it's much undervalued these days. um, and what I'm hearing is that, well, you did that already at 14. You keep stressing that you didn't invent it, it was not big, but at the same time, I also want to stress out, if you kind of do these kind of things at 14, there's a lot of, and again, that's nothing wrong, but there's a lot of people at 14 like, okay, I want to do cool stuff with friends, and I don't want to be that, and then there is people like you who say, hey, I see something, I think I can help out, and I spend my time, and yeah, that's very nice as well.
Thank you.
And you made it your job in a way, as a change agent for agile coach or for sustainability. It's basically all you learned somehow. Hey, I'm good at that and I can help a lot of people. So that's kind of nice if you can discover that. You probably didn't discover it, but you realize it later, but still you did it at 14. So that's really a nice thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. It's how I recognize how that it was what drives me, you know, because even though the specifics of it were different, it's definitely still the pattern that I keep repeating is connecting people to bigger causes. I'm a connector, a pattern connector, a people connector. This is who I am. Yeah.
I really like that pattern connector. That's the word I'm going to keep borrowing from you. So thank you for that. I like that. And actually, that kind of brings me automatically to that next question. What is your biggest achievement? And what I've done, what I've learned over the 3 years now that I've been doing is that this is basically me giving you the opportunity to brag and to be really proud. Is that easy for you to brag before we jump into
No,
the real question?
no, it's not easy for me to brag.
Okay.
So uh, the biggest achievement is being a parent. I think you could
Mm.
probably agree with that one. But if I'm supposed to brag at this point, I can brag if I can try and brag if you like.
Mhm.
So the biggest achievements, recent achievements, apart from the balancing act that we've spoken about already, is we with the help of a group, a community that we've grown in the last few years, is the agilists for sustainability and the agilists for planet. So the agilists for planet conference will be running for its third year early next year, in the first half of next year, where we are really bringing together the people at this edge of agile, who are also seeing that all these wonderful powers that we have as agilists can be used for the greater good of the planet, whether that be through diversity inclusion, or helping with poverty, or helping with animals, or helping with climate and the weather patterns, farming, whatever it is. You know, it's a huge subject, sustainability, but it's really bringing together people who are using this wonderful mindset, these wonderful tools and techniques that we have as agilists in our back pocket, to tackle some of these wicked problems in the world. So that is really kind of my shining achievement right now, is helping with that, helping create that, helping make that happen, and really spreading the word as that we have superpowers as agilists. And I don't believe it's just in helping people deliver technology quicker and better. You know, I really believe that we have these superpowers for a bigger and better reason, and that really is to help us with the future that's coming, you know, and to help make that as good as it can be.
So not helping companies make more money and everything. That's like so
No,
making a
exactly.
joke out of that.
Do
Yeah.
they need to? Do they
Uh,
need to make more money? Is money really, you know, really valuable? Is that what we're really after as humans? Money? I mean, we could go down that route if you like.
yeah. We can definitely, and I think, well, it's not like I think if you ask anybody, do you want more money? Then in general, the answer would be yes. And depending on what industry it is, yeah, you actually might be in trouble and need more money. And at the same time, there's lots of us that have enough more or a lot more than we need to survive and to help out
Mm,
and other kind of things. Yeah, I lived 3 years of welfare, which was
yeah,
an incredibly low amount. And uh, yeah, I do remember that first year working, making like triple that kind of money and not being able to save any money. Where the year
yeah,
before I could save 10% of my income, or well, the money I had from welfare. So it showed me very quickly that more money doesn't mean, well, more
yeah,
happiness, all of for sure, but also not that you can save more or whatever. You just need, you can spend more, but the question is, do you always need it? And in my case, that very first year, yeah, I was making, how do I call it? R- Going back and spending money that I didn't spend the last 5 years. So in that sense, I wanted to keep
Mm.
up
Yeah.
with some of the things I didn't spend, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure I spend money on stuff that I totally didn't need either. Um,
Yeah, it's
because
an interesting
yeah.
place that we're in, right? So, I
Mhm.
also have been on welfare, so I do understand exactly what you're saying and where you're coming from, having had very similar experiences, to be fair. Um, but it's interesting what we do now with money, you know, and how we equate it with our own worth and our own value, and also how
Mm,
we see things and objects as what we desire. You know, it's a thing, you know,
mm,
how much value can it actually give us when it's, you know, is it help it, even these things, you know, that supposedly do things faster for us, help us with uh, take less time to do things, you know, actually, does that stop us thinking deeply about whether we need to be doing it? You know, maybe the thought
mm.
process that we go through when it's slower is necessary for some reason that we haven't quite figured out yet. You know, this is very kind of philosophical conversation that we're having, but you understand where I'm coming from is actually right now with the consumer world that we live in, value is not really valuable. What we think is valuable, I think.
That's, yeah, something I recognize definitely. Well, doing something quicker that you don't need to do, how valuable is that?
Yeah,
And indeed, especially buying stuff like, okay, will it make us more happy? Because that's it about. And of course, if I want to keep up with other people, there will be a moment. Yeah, there is always people around me that will have more money, but yeah, will I
yeah,
feel much better if I have more? I'm doubting it.
mm,
Um, and yeah, that's definitely being at rock bottom when living off welfare made me realize that in multiple ways I was happy
mm,
with the life I had. There was definitely things that were not good, but that's also part of the life I had. But not I would say very little had to do with the amount of money I had.
mm,
Um, and yeah, some people that didn't value me because I didn't have money, I'm not sure I wanted to have
yeah,
as friends, for example.
yeah,
That's also something that is it's actually very interesting because you learn how who your
mm,
true friends are, which is an interesting
yeah,
thing. If you have a lot of money, you don't really know. Well, I've never been rich, so I don't know. But if
mm,
I look around people who have way more money than me, then I sometimes indeed hear like, yeah, I don't know why they are friends with me. Is that because I have that much money
mm,
or
yeah.
because they actually like what I'm saying? So yeah, that's a very interesting discussion as well as that, and that kind of leads us also to some kind of tip, and I want to move to that question where we go much more deeper in these kind of things. Do you have a personal agility tip to share on top of what we just discussed?
Personal agility tip. It's it's a mindset. It's not a process, it's not a technique, it's the way that you think about life is agility to me. So in my personal life, it's breaking down bigger problems into smaller steps. It's thinking about your circles of concern. So what can you actually control, what can you influence, and actually what are you concerned about which you have no control or influence over. So it's using the techniques that we have as agilists actually within our own lives. It's so for example, the circles of concern, I'm sure you've had other people talk about it on here. Um, but it's been a super useful tool for people I'm coaching just to think about those things they're in their concern circle, um, to then enable them to acknowledge that they're there and then let them go. Because as people, we worry, like we're worriers naturally. I think people are worriers, and we like to worry about things that actually has no effect by us worrying about them, right? So people say I'm quite a positive person, so even in all this kind of difficult stuff that I'm working in, I'm very positive. I like to smile, I like to laugh, you know, have fun as much as possible. But the only way that in my for myself that I can do that is acknowledging that there's lots of things that are difficult that I'm concerned about, that I don't like or maybe even hate, but I can't do anything about them. And that's okay. So I can let them go. I don't have to worry about them because I can't influence or control them. Or at least now, maybe I put it in my back brain and suddenly I'll wake up in the middle of the night and think, I could do that. But in general, a lot of these things we just need to let go of and really think about, well, if you are concerned about that, what is it that's within your influence or control that you might be able to affect that thing that you're concerned about? So maybe it's a big worldwide problem, which you can't affect, but you could change it within your local area. So for example, one of the things I'm starting to really worry about is our supply chains when it comes to food. So in the UK, 80% of our land is used to raise cattle, so to grow the crops, but also to raise the cattle as well. Um, and cows are not going to sustain the population, if we manage to lose our fruit and vegetable supply chains, which is likely to happen as the climate changes, right? So I can't affect that global supply chain issue. Of course I can't. But actually, what I can do is I can grow some of my own food. I can help out at the local gardens, the local community gardens, to spend some of my time helping the community grow their own food. I can speak to my friends, to other parents, and say, this is what's going to happen. Do you want some help growing your own food? Maybe not quite like that, because that conversation would be interesting. However, you get the point I'm trying to make, is that actually the bigger piece you can't control, you can't influence at all. But on a local level, actually, you have some influence, you have some control. So it's thinking about those small steps on the bigger problems that you can actually do something about, and then letting go of the bigger problem that you can only be concerned about.
I really like the circle of control, the circle of influences, and everything. Actually, it's I've learned it from a book that was actually so. Okay, let's give some context, because it might be interesting for you or me, but not for everybody else. Yesterday we were in a
Yeah,
conversation that Marissa
mine.
organized mine thank you organized, and talk about sustainability and books like that. And one of the books I had lying next to me was The Seven Habits of Effective People, which is
Oh, yeah.
actually where I've learned this one. And actually I didn't bring it up because in the whole conversation, I didn't think it added value. But for me, thinking with the end in mind and everything about the circle of influence and the circle of control and everything there is really so useful in all kind of discussions.
Yeah,
It's not for nothing that this is the most sold business book in a way. Because indeed it really helps to think about, okay, I might not change everything, but there are stuff that I can change, and where can I take my responsibility
mm,
of looking what part can I control. um, and yeah, we can have all kinds of discussions, is that really then the big influence and whatever. But I think it also makes me feel much more like, okay, I can look at it, I can look where can I send a message to people,
yeah,
because by buying locally or by not buying at whatever, I might hurt them, but it might make think them, and maybe influence a lot of other people. And that is it makes me think about the famous quote, like, everybody thinks it's too small to make an impact. You should really
yeah.
think about that. Um, um, come the animal, not uh, a moustique in French,
Mosquito.
again.
Mosquito?
The mosquito. If you're alone in a bed with a mosquito, well, you will feel that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah,
You can't sleep of it, and that actually is just one mosquito that has a big influence on a
yeah,
big human being. And that's a little bit just the same thing. I sometimes feel like, yes, we can have an influence, positive or negative. and much more that we actually think about.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up, because it's so valuable. I sometimes see people when I join a company and they feel very frustrated because, yeah, there's big changes that need to happen there, but yeah, it's very easy to point to other people and what they have to do. But
Mm,
okay, let's start at our level. And the better, I think, the more we focus on our circle of control, the bigger our circle becomes, and actually
yeah.
will help us to get much more influence. If I do things much more on my own, I can show that I can make a difference. My friends might follow my advice. If I just say, "Oh, all of you have to do this," and I don't change my life, probably they won't follow me at all, and that
Yeah.
doesn't help me at that level.
And just talking about the changes that you're doing, this is what a lot of people don't realize, how much of an impact it can make. Is that if you've made changes for a reason, um, talk about it. We're almost embarrassed to talk about, like, reasons, we're recycling, or we're buying local, or we're doing this and that. So many people are now doing it, but we're not talking about it. And if we talked about it more, it would become more of the norm. And actually, we'd get to what we call the social tipping point, when all of this becomes normal and people say, oh, yeah, I've been doing that for years, when actually they've hardly been doing it at all. But it doesn't matter, because the changes in society have occurred. So yes, please talk to other people about the reason for the changes that you're making in your lives, and what those changes are, and have those discussions, because it's that then that circle of control and influence just widens. So absolutely.
It's yeah, very useful, especially for younger people, that they don't always realize that they see what's happening on the on the outer scale, and they want to change it. And sometimes indeed, talking about it, but actually actions make a
Yeah.
lot of difference. Just like the 14-year-old you had a difference to other people's life, and of course, you don't know whose life you touched because you had money that helped other people to
Yeah.
be able to call in, but you did have an influence on these other children, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
And
so, and we can take those same things within our organizations. So, and this is where I'm at with sustainability now. Is actually, it's not the yes, we can make a difference as personal consumers within our society. How we consume, what we consume, where we spend our money has an influence, has an impact. But actually, we have an impact, we have influence within the companies that we work in. That, we are not just employees who are there only to do, the exact role that we've been given, and the exact, tasks. It's, you're also there for your mind, for your personality, have those conversations if you're interested about how to make things more sustainable. And if you don't know how, feel free, reach out. I'm happy to have that conversation with you to start with.
yeah, and I think that's indeed what for a lot of that is, that if you don't know how, well, ask for help, and other people can help you and help you get more influence, and that kind of thing. So a lot is happening there. And I want to go back a little bit also to another part of the conversation where you talked about your old teacher that was actually a role model on you,
Yeah.
that maybe didn't even realize that that had such an influence on you. And I think the reason why I want to bring it up, because I didn't mention it at that moment, but I thought about it, is that we usually don't say that enough. And I'm
Yeah.
trying these days to say a lot more to people, like, hey, this was actually helped me a lot. You're for me a role model. Yeah, I think we need to do that much more, because yeah, we know that we sometimes help, but we don't always know who we helped, and we sometimes tell it to people. But I've actually been into the path of doing much more, of saying, like, to people, like, hey, 10 years ago, this or that had a huge impact on me, because I just know it's important to share. Um, so I think and that helps again, that sort of realizing people, their circle of influence and everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's actually an exercise which we do. I think we're going to end up doing it yearly in the Agilist for a sustainability meetup, which we created. It's called um, the mycelium, of impact. Exactly thinking about that. So, no, sorry, it's the mycelium of micro nudges. Came out of XP 2023. That name, micro nudges. But it's really thinking exactly about that. Is who has influence or given you that little push to for you to take steps, for you to change something in your life, and then who have you then had a knock-on impact to. And it can be as big or as small as you like, because it really doesn't matter. They all add up. Every single small change adds up to a much bigger difference.
Yeah, and it reminds me of another thing that I've learned from Chris Matz, does the who started doing that on Twitter 14 years ago or something like that. My Daily Thank You, where when he
Mm,
read the book from Jane, I forgot her name. The book is called Reality is Broken, where he learned about a lot of different things, and he said, okay, I want to do actually share much more my appreciation for people, and started then on Twitter, I think on a daily basis, sending out messages to people like, hey, I really like, and that I started doing that much more as well, like really telling people like the small appreciations. And I see a lot more people doing it. We have in management 3.0, we have the kudos that we can send out, and
yeah.
lots
Yeah.
of other things. And I think, yeah, I try to do it both on a small level, like, okay, this is what I found interesting today, but also on the larger level, like, hey, I see that you had an influence on me, like Chris had on me, for example, on doing that. So that's the kind of stuff. I really like that if we
Yeah.
can, as a community, do that much more.
Mm. As humans, can we be human beings, right?
Exactly, which is yeah, that is probably what makes us humans
Mm.
much more. Uh, that is that whole part of appreciation for each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's move to that next question. What have you learned about remote working?
I love it.
And when did you learn that? When did you learn it that you love that? When did you start doing remote working and learning really that you loved it?
So, I actually was doing remote working back in 2013, 2014, when I'd come back to the UK from Malta, where I was still working remotely in Malta while having just given birth to my child.
When you say just, could you how much time frame is there between giving birth and start
4 months,
working again?
3, 4 months.
Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
still very early in motherhood, but not 4 days. It almost sounded like you started doing it immediately. That's why I was
No,
starting to
not
ask for.
quite, not quite. But I do like to be dramatic occasionally, you know.
Well, but well, I know that in the United States, I know people start sometimes really way too early.
Yeah,
I know that there's other countries where people can stay at home mothers for at least a year, sometimes even 2 years. So 4 months for these people is very early, but compared to 4 days or a couple of weeks,
yeah,
it's still it's at least a little bit better.
yeah, it's a little bit
Um,
better.
so okay, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
Continue. So you go back. You leave from Malta, go back to the UK. You're now full time. You're a mother for 4 months, and then you start working again, and you start working remotely. And
I started working remotely, and at that time, it was terrible. It was
mm,
terrible back then. So this is 11 years ago. We didn't have the technology. Um, so we had Skype. That was what we
mhm.
had back then. You remember? So we could do video calls, thank goodness, but the connection kept dropping. It was not
The
consistent.
cameras were really terrible compared to now. Yeah,
Yeah, all of this kind of thing. So it was really difficult, and people didn't know how to communicate remotely, really, or in a hybrid kind of working style.
we
Um,
do now.
I think some people do now.
Okay,
I think we have so much tech which enables us to work, um, especially all remote or all in person. The hybrid
right.
is difficult, really difficult.
We
Um,
haven't figured that one out, but all remote, some
yeah,
of us have figured it out. That's what you're saying, right?
yeah, exactly. So let's be fair. There's ways to make people comfortable on a call, and some people are always going to be more comfortable on a call. So the more introverted people, the people who struggle a little bit with social interaction, they're actually much more likely to be able to express themselves in a well-designed remote workshop than they are in a face-to-face workshop. So actually, um, for a lot of people, remote is easier, which is why so many people enjoy it, right? But that doesn't mean that it's easier for everybody. What I found during COVID was actually you really saw who the extroverts were, who gain energy from being around people, compared to the introverts who like having time by themselves. That became quite stark in certain people, right? Um, and so what I found is that if you have mixed groups, which of course most groups are, if you are working remotely, you can design your sessions so that you allow for all these different types of personalities, for all these different traits of people. And actually, for me personally, I find I can bring more probably out of a whole group, if you're remote. But that's, I don't know, maybe that's one of my superpowers, who knows?
Very, I think you summarize a lot of what I see also indeed with remote work. Like, indeed, it's not good or bad. It's like a lot of the context matters. The
Yeah,
the introvert, the extrovert, it's different kind of things. And what you didn't say, but I kind of heard, is like the remote, no, the physical world is in favor of the extroverts,
yeah,
and the remote work is much more for the introverts. And again, it's not black and white.
no,
People might different a little bit, but yeah, it allows at least for introverts to feel much more in control of their own space, and like it much more.
yeah,
um, and yeah, if we're talking hybrid, then we're talking again about finding something where it works for everybody. And I think right now nobody has found how to make that work.
no,
Um, I'm still personally convinced that we might be able to find that, but
yeah,
like you said, in 2014, we didn't make it was really hard to make remote working, and
mm,
so 10 years later we're much better at that.
yeah,
It will probably take us another 10 to 20 years before we figured out what's working with hybrid. We need probably other kind of tools, and yeah, there might be an option there, but way too early to say.
yeah,
And I really like how you said it about some people have figured out remote, not everybody yet. And again, it might not be for everybody, just like working in person might not be for everybody.
mm,
But before, that was the default and the only way of working. And now we found like, hey, there is actually multiple options, and multiple people might gravitate to by different kind of ways of doing that.
yes, absolutely. The best way I found to do hybrid is to allocate a person in the room as the hybrid person's spokesperson. So they have to look after that person who's online, as it were, and make sure if they want to speak, they're heard. But it's not a good solution, but it's the best I've found so far.
Yeah, the but I have a different kind of version of that. Is that I think if you work hybrid, you need two facilitators, one for in the
Yes,
room and one for outside
nice.
the room. And preferable, the facilitator remote is remote, but then the two facilitators have to have a way to communicate with each other
Yeah,
and say, like, look a little bit, and think about how to make both parts as important in the meeting,
yeah,
and not just in favor of one or the other, because I've seen it go wrong in both directions. Too much attention to the remote people or too much attention to the in-person people. But yeah, it's really a lot more work. Just like remote facilitation is a lot harder than in-person facilitation. Well, especially because we're so much used to the in-person
yeah,
facilitation, where the habits are already there, and the remote habits are a lot harder for a lot of people.
yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
I want to move to that next question, and I know you have, I think, at least a couple of them. But what's a book that you were thinking that you wanted to talk about?
So I touched upon this a little bit in what we've spoken about. It's Who Do You Choose to Be by Margaret Wheatley,
And
which was mentioned
bring that.
yesterday.
Let me bring that book online. Somehow my screen didn't work, and so that's the book. Who do we choose to be?
Yes. Um,
And why should I read this book?
it tells you, it's about where we are in the state of the world. When we look at the cyclical nature of civilizations and of human history, looking backwards, civilizations go through cycles. And actually, it's showing us is that we're at the end of a cycle with regards to civilization. So all of these metrics with regards to human behavior are telling us that civilization is about to break down. So it's not just our weather patterns that are breaking down. It's actually the behavior of humans is telling us that civilization is about to break down as well, which is all joining into this meta crisis that I spoke about earlier, right? So it's why I think you should read it is it allows you to take an almost scientific step backwards at looking at where we are as humanity, which then allows you to take a giant leap forwards into, okay, now what can I do? She talks about islands of sanity and how to become these islands of sanity in all the chaos that is happening right now. So it's creating or increasing your resilience as a person, as a human, as a leader, whether you're a leader from the side, which is what I call myself, or a leader from the front, or a leader from behind. It doesn't matter. It's actually how can we stay sane and be human beings when actually humanity in a lot of cases is not really acting like human beings around us, you know. So it's a very human book, shall we say?
Like that. It's yeah, it again, like you said, we talked about a lot of different kind of things, and seeing then where we can make a choice again, and that's what I like so much about that title. It's really choosing who we want to be and choosing how do we want to show up and
Yeah,
what's the kind of person we want to be. And of course there is parts of it that's already there, but I see so many people that are, yeah, I would say almost either burned out or bored
yeah,
out at work because they can't be the person that they want to be. For whatever reason, there could be good and bad reasons, but I have the feeling, or at least that it also feels what you talk about in this book, but it's something that I feel is that the more we can be the person that we want to be, that we actually get more energy out of a lot of the things, because some of the things that you just talked about at work is really hard. But
yeah,
if that's really ingrained in us, it actually gives more energy than it takes it away, at least as long as we can try to be that. And if we kind of want to hide who we are, that actually usually takes energy, I would
yeah,
say. And
absolutely.
is that book helping in that, or how should it? Because now I'm babbling my own kind of theory, but I'm not sure how that where that book would help me in this.
So it doesn't really talk about finding your personal purpose and things like that, which feels like that's where you're going with what some of you are saying. Though I'm quite lucky in that I believe I found my purpose in life, and that has definitely energized me. You know, going back to what we were talking about with balancing all the different hats and things like that. You know, where would I find the energy for that? And that is definitely because I am driven. You know, as we also spoke about. You know, my driven by my purpose and by my values. So um, she doesn't really talk about that, but it is thinking. It does help you think about the current state of where we are in the world, and how that's not. It's not the end point. It's not a doom point. It's how can we go beyond that by being caring about others. You know, by giving gratitude to people for having done something for you, like you were just talking about. It's showing these little moments of what it truly means to be a human being, which isn't someone who goes to work to earn money to put food on the table. Being human is way beyond that, and sometimes I think we forget. We've isolated ourselves from others, almost through tech. Sometimes we've isolated ourselves from nature, and how we are nature. We're connected to nature. We're driving division between masculine and feminine, between something that's different to you, when actually we need to all come together so that we can belong as one interconnected species, interconnected on this planet together. So it's it's talking about how do we live through the chaos that's coming, and who do we as humans, how can we be human beings in this chaos that is already starting and that is just going to get worse.
It's indeed the risk that I was going to ask, indeed, of finding the purpose, but I was looking much more like, okay, how could it help me once I know? Because when I talked about the people at work, I see a lot of people who don't feel that they can do at work what they want to do, but then find that same purpose in doing something somewhere else, at in a community, or helping out. And I'm not against that, but at the same time, it's sad that they can't do it at work. And if you
Yeah,
already know these kind of things, and a book like this can help you, how could you channel that kind of thing
yeah,
into, well, the 8 hours that you spend at work, or probably minimum at work, and that give you a lot more energy than, yeah,
yeah.
just feeling blushed out.
Yes, absolutely. I've been highly lucky in that, in my role at Digital, I was hired as a agile delivery coach, and I brought sustainability to the company. And I said to my boss, "Listen, I feel I want to call myself an agile and sustainability coach. I feel that's what I'm doing now." And my boss said, "Yeah, sure, go for it. I see that. I agree." And because I was allowed to be my full self at work, I I was it's enabled me to join my purpose with my 8 hours a day, which it's been huge for me. So I yeah, completely agree with you.
Yeah, well, yesterday, that book was also in our conversation, and it was already a trigger for me. But there was a lot of books that were triggering. So, and that's for me, one of my challenges, of course, with this podcast, is that every week something is published, and there is always at least one book that is interestingly enough to say, "Oh, I want to read." And I still want to reread some of the books I liked so much years ago, because I sometimes feel like I need to reread to relearn some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I keep talking to people, so I'm not sure how much time I have. But still, it's interesting to know about these kind of things, and I do hope at least it inspires others to also read these kind of books, because I think, just like you talked earlier about the conference and everything that's going around, I think there is a lot there that we can do as a community, and help and support each other, in making that a better world, whatever, in no, I want to say different, in whatever better it is for you or
Yeah.
for me. It might be different, but we all have a different better version. And instead of just discussing, that everybody should follow my better, if we can just if I can make the world better in my view, and you can make it better in your view, all the rest together will make it a better world, I would say. That's
Yes. Well, they're all interconnected anyhow. It's
exactly, and that's really helping. Um, I want to move to that next question, which is, for me, one of the most interesting ones, and that is, what's a question do you think that I should also ask you, and why is that? What's the answer?
so we've kind of spoken about this actually quite a lot, but I think it's worth being explicit. Uh, is what's next for agilists. Okay. And for me, the next transformation or metamorphosis is the new word I'm using, which I quite like, is the sustainability transformation, the regenerative transformation. I truly believe that agility and agile brought social sustainability to the workplace. So when we think about the values and the principles, it really was about how we allow people to be people, and that diversity and inclusion, everybody to be brought in so that the best product could be made in the quickest time, right? Um, so that's really thinking about social sustainability in the workplace. So when we think about what agile can do next, I believe we go into that wider space of sustainability, exactly like we've just been talking about. For me, it's the environment. It's, that connection to Mother Nature has always been my calling. So I'm probably going to talk to you about, your carbon emissions and, reducing your waste, and how do we circularize your product, and is it product as a service, et cetera, et cetera. But for you, it could be about diversity and inclusion. That's definitely your bag, right? So, and that is again part of sustainability. So go and, help out in that space. That's within your work environment, but also outside of it as well. It's whatever you said that in a really nice way, and I'm trying to remember. Is however you want to make the world a better place, go and help in that space, right? And that will help. And that's really important. And I think that's the next step for Agilists.
It's really, yeah, it's if we can all have indeed that focus, that's in making that, and that is where I do recognize a lot of agilists, and in I'm not surprised that, well, you're not the first to talk about this concept or this idea. A lot of people, actually
Yeah.
people that we've met yesterday, or some of that we met yesterday, but also much broader. And it feels like once you, yeah, you make the team a better place and you make the company a better place, then you all around, you look
Yeah.
around and you say, well, there is actually a lot more, and actually I might make more impact or better impact on, and that's the kind of thing. And somehow, and it's strange because at the same time it feels like the world is worse off today than it was like 5 years
Yeah.
ago. And in some, and maybe that's why I see a lot more people caring about that, and
Mm.
doing something around that. So that is, yeah, something I recognize there. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's, for me, well, a lot of people, when I bring this question, a lot of people talk about, sometimes people talk about the end of agile, and agile is dead. But this is much more like the future of agile,
Yeah.
independent of it's dead or not, whatever that would mean. But this is an, yeah, I would say a much more positive message to bring, which yeah, in that sense I like, and many people think in that direction, so I really like that. So, so thank you very much for bringing that up. I want to move already to that very last question. Who do you think I should ask next? And I think you have a couple of people that you were thinking about, so let's bring them on.
Okay. So I'm actually just going to suggest one.
Okay.
So my workshop second or first partner, that's the right word, at XP Days, Sathpal Singh, where we did a workshop.
And I think that's the person you're thinking
Yeah,
about.
very nice. And I think you two are going to get on really well, because his space in sustainability is also diversion and inclusion. So you guys will get on well. And he we did a workshop called Agility Through Regenerative Change. So this is taking sustainability almost to the next level. So if you think sustainability is the end, think again. How do we actually regenerate the planet and ourselves and the companies and all the rest of it? How do we create spaces and organizations that are life-giving rather than destructive towards life, as a lot is now? So that's what we spoke about at our workshop in XP Days, and he is a very good friend, and I'm privileged to have him as a friend, and he would be wonderful on this. So yes, Safbal.
Uh, but I did have the chat with him as well, and yeah, I do agree. I think we get along really well. So yeah, I really look forward to having it. Actually, when you gave that name, it was actually scheduled for practically for tomorrow. Recording this on a Tuesday, and it was recorded. His schedule was or his. Conversation was scheduled for tomorrow, but for practical reasons, that will be ported to another day. Um, but it would have been really interesting for me to have both of you in just 2 days. But okay, life happens, and then things shift
Yeah.
around a little bit, and that's fine as well. Um, Joanne, Joanna, we've been talking for almost 2 hours, a little less. For the people that want to reach out to you and want to connect, what's a good way to connect to you?
LinkedIn is the best place.
And I think that's
Yeah.
the connection.
Yeah, Masraff. There's not many of us, so you'll find me.
That helps having a
Yeah.
unique first last name.
Yeah.
That really helps indeed. Our parents, most of our parents didn't think about, at least my parents didn't think about that when I was born, because I have a nephew with the exact first name and exact same last name, and
Good.
actually the middle name, the second name, second first name is also the same. So really, if we go on LinkedIn, I'm usually now, although he's older, I'm much quicker at making sure I have all these connections so people can find me back. But then people connect or contact me to connect to him, so that's a different kind of thing. But it's really been a wonderful conversation here, a
Yes.
wonderful 2 hours. Yeah, I really want to thank you for that because I was really looking forward to it, and it didn't disappoint me at all. And
Thank you. Me
quite
too.
the opposite. It's really fun. And to have you and to go dive into all that into your world in a way. So thank you for that time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a really good conversation with you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.